Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 318. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, I'm Gayle from Communities Digital News, Daniel from The Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
Glad to be here. Glad to get rolling. Let's do it.
Indeed, there's a lot of boxing going on. For those who are new to the show, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, and finally website that discusses all things boxing. No matter when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. For all information, and not for the time being, permanent. At least until I pay the money to do everything to upload the re-up the website and whatever. But still, for right now, to find out all information, you can go to p4pboxingreport.com. Just create the website during our time off last week. Still working on it. It's not totally complete, but it's up and it's public for everybody to see. If you check the blog page, you will find links to where to find us on social media, on the YouTube page, the Twitter page, the Facebook page, and we're now on IG. Yes, Pound for Pound Box Report is officially on Instagram. Also on the page, tabs to where to find us all over the podcast realm: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, as well as Anchor. Got a button on there where you can donate. Let donation be the best nation. Got donation links for Cash Me and PayPal. So if you scroll down, you can check us out there. You can check the information about me, your host, what I do, as well as information where you can follow Gayle, where you can follow Daniel and their businesses and their other workings and other media outlets. And if you scroll on the very near the bottom of the page, you'll also find information where if you're looking to get into shape and whatnot, find link to my online coaching page. I'm an health and wellness coach for Beachbody. If you're interested in any of the programs on Beachbody On Demand, be it bar blend, be it 6 weeks of the work, old school P90X series, 10 rounds, the boxing based program, scroll down to the bottom of the page. Or if you're interested in 2 weeks of free workouts, take care of that. Nothing's better than free. Beachbody On Demand offers 2-week trial free workouts throughout the sites where you can have all access to all workouts. Beachbody On Demand, where you can find any workouts which suits your interest, whatever you're looking for: functional training, yoga, strength work, bodybuilding. Beachbody On Demand, it has it all. So yeah, you can check out all that information now on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report website. Once again, p4pboxingreport.com. And also you can email, new email, by the way, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Let me repeat that: p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. Let's get things started. On a bit of a sad note, unfortunately, last week we talked a lot about the rematch between Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. The day of that fight, while the fight was in full bore, we received some pretty devastating news as the boxing community lost one of its legends, marvelous Marvin Hagler, middleweight all-time great, one of the best fighters of the 1980s. News broke via his wife that he passed away Saturday, March 13th, at the age of 66. Don't know the details, what caused his death, but the marvelous one is no longer with us. For those who don't know, for younger fans, Hagler came through the ranks in the 1970s in the East Coast, fought through the tough Philadelphia circuit. That's where he suffered his 2 losses. I think it was 52, 2-2 to that effect. Willie Monroe, Cyclone Hart, he later on avenged those losses. Was number 1 contender for a good while, over a year. He finally got his shot against Vito Artefermo, November 79. The fight was a draw, but most observers agree that Hagler won that fight and won it clearly. got a second opportunity in September of 1980, fighting Alan Minter in England. Um, the fight was marred by the ugly lead up, a lot of covert and overt racial innuendo that Hagler was on the receiving end of. He wasn't just booed on the way to the ring. He had the inward hurled at him. Hagler beat up, destroyed Minter in 3 rounds, but he was never able to bask in the glory of his title win as the British fans threw debris, beer towards the ring. Hagler had to be escorted out of the ring as a result, but he used that experience as fuel to have one of the most dominant middleweight reigns of all time. 12 defenses over a nearly 7-year reign as middleweight champion. Um, he was defined uh, as one of the quartet of the 1980s. Hagler, Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, they all fought each other. Uh, Hagler is most memorized. People remember Hagler most for his fights against Duran in '82 November, against Hearns in April 1985, which was one of the, even though it only went 3 rounds, Hagler won, stopped Hearns. The first round is arguably the greatest single round in boxing history. Uh, he also, in his last fight, lost in a very controversial way to Ray Leonard in 1987, April 1987. Had the opportunity to fight him again, but Hagler was so um, bittered by that experience, he vowed to never fight again. He moved on to Italy, where he had some moderate success as an actor, but he was also an ambassador of the sport. And yes, he is. It's when I heard the news, I was devastated. I wish Bo from Truth and Facts and Three Kings Boxing was on here because Hagler was indeed his favorite all-time fighter. I would just give him the floor, just let him opine about Marvin Hagler. Uh, but I'll go to you first, Gail, and then you can add on, Daniel. Uh, the memory, the legacy of Marvin Hagler, one of the true greats. He had his nickname changed. He had his name officially changed to Marvelous. He lived up to that Marvelous moniker inside the ring.
Really devastating news. Beyond Hagler's achievements in the ring, he it could be argued he was one of the last great superstar icons beyond boxing, as boxing was slowly transitioning to what we realistically recognize. It's more of a niche sport, especially in the United States now. There was a time when boxers, famous boxers, would be recognized on the street, just like any celebrity from film or TV. The way that somebody like LeBron James would be recognized today. They were famous figures. They were on national TV talk shows, all of that. It first of all, Hagler was very recognizable with that shaved head and that menacing look. So that didn't hurt, and he had that persona that drew people to him. In addition, with the skills that were thrilling to see, paid off in the ring, exactly what people would imagine a boxer to be. That's what he was. And that first round with Hearns, that 3 minutes, it's perhaps the purest 3 minutes in boxing till this day. And, the fight didn't need to go more than 3 rounds. The fight jam-packed, more action than even one 12, 15-round fight deserved. And my dog's even excited about it. And when someone older will say to you, they don't make them like that anymore. They don't make them like that anymore because partially the sport has changed. The universe around us has changed. And that's why his loss is being felt so deeply. And what a shame that it happened. Although I would say it's a shame that it happened Saturday late, right before the big card on DAZN out of Texas, but it allowed the boxing community to circle and memorialize him quickly in the moment with Michael Buffer sounding the Memorial 10 count, and he was very emotional when he did that, a very fitting tribute.
Let's get into a deep dive about this, because Daniel, because I think among younger fans, uh, younger folks who call themselves hardcore, quote unquote, right? Uh, Within the boxing circles that both of us venture in, particularly on social media, Twitter, and particularly here on YouTube, and going back and forth, cutting it up, talking about the sweet science. I think, one, we didn't give him his enough roses and honor him enough while he was alive, right? Two, B, I think there's a wrong perception about Hagler, the fighter. Okay, what do I mean? A lot of people, when they talk about, particularly a lot of younger fans or contemporary fans of fanboys of certain middleweights, super middleweights today, when they look at Hagler, they define him by his last three fights. The Hearns fight, which Gayle talked about in 85, the John Mugabe fight in 86, which Mugabe gave Hagler a rough go of it before Hagler stopped him in 11, and the loss to Leonard in 87. They use that to say that Hagler essentially was just nothing more than a tough guy and a brawler. And I'll go here, right? They will say they will use that and compare a Hagler to a Golovkin, a Canelo. One, dismiss Hagler's ability. Two, will even go so far as to say that if Hagler was around today, that a lot of the current middleweights or super middleweights, particularly Golovkin and Canelo, because I hear this a lot, they will say that Hagler would stand no chance. My pushback is, and a reason I'm talking about it now is because I want to use this moment as a teaching lesson to say Hagler was more than those three fights. It can be argued that by the time those fights happened, particularly the Mugabe and the Leonard fight, Hagler may have been slightly on the other side of his best days. If you really want to know what Hagler truly was about, the complete fighter that he was, look at Hagler from the Antifermo draw, which was really a win in most people's opinion, up into in 79, up into, let's just say, October 84, when he defeated Mustafa Hamsho in the rematch. It's a long-winded way of saying that Hagler was much more than a brawler. Hagler was much more than a tough guy. At his best, he was one of the more complete, well-rounded fighters in the game. You want someone who could box, he could do it. You want someone who can fight on the inside, he could do it. You want someone who could counter, could slip, he could do it. Coupled with the fact that he could really punch, and he had one of the greatest chins of the sport. So I want to go there when it comes to the discussion about Hagler, just to give a true representation of who he was in the ring. Because in total, he was a man who could do it all.
Oh, where to begin? Where to begin? Yeah, Hagler among the four kings, unfortunately, especially among the young crowd, is not the most well known, not as beloved in his home country as Duran, not as mainstream famous as Leonard, not as at least imposing, at least to the casual fan, imposing figure as Tommy Hearns. And yet he stood toe to toe, went on with all of them, and gave them the business. If you want, like, if younger fans want a close equivalent to how Hagler was treated in the way he look at Bernard Hopkins. Look at the way Hopkins built his career up to when he finally got that fight that made him versus Trinidad, and how he was known to that. People tend to forget what he built up prior to that. That's how unfortunately we have with Hagler, and a lot of it, including the vitriol that he had to face, the racism that he had to face. Think about it; it was so bad. He chose to move to Italy. And that's probably another thing that probably doesn't make him that well known, unfortunately, among younger American boxing fans. Is that he's been overseas, he's been away, even though we know he's been a constant in Castellano. Like it's gonna be hard to picture that parade if they have the parade this year. It's gonna be very, very hard to picture without that car that has marvelous Marvin Hagler on it. It hurts in a way thinking about it now. But the ferocity that he fought, the work rate that he fought, and just the manner that he carried himself should be an example to a lot of people. He's one of the few guys that, even when like his managers tried to say like, we need to give you a bigger cut because you're making more money, he felt offended by that. He just said, no, I'm going to pay you the same rate that I paid you throughout my career because you guys have done the job. He's one of Bob Arum's, like I said, the all-time favorite fighters. One of the fighters, he says that Arum spoiled him. I think it was one of the quotes that he had when they taught him about the passing. It's just in the work rate that he fought, and I'm sorry for. I know Triple G stands want to be out there saying that Golovkin would be the. I'm on the record as saying that Monson would obliterate Triple G.
Golovkin fans need to stop that ASAP.
Yeah, I'm on the record. I said that Monson would just annihilate Triple G. Hagler would do the similar.
Yeah, let me jump right in here. I will consider myself a Golovkin fan. Hagler would be a tough hill for that man to climb. Very, very tough hill. And I'm glad you brought up Hopkins, Daniel. You know, Hopkins idolized Hagler, modeled a lot of his life in and out of the ring after Hagler. And part of the reason Hagler was able to walk away the way he did is very much as Hopkins also has done for himself. He was very good with his money. He was very shrewd. He invested well. When he disappeared overseas, he was able to hang on to a lot of his money, invested, kept it, so that if he chose not to return, if he chose not to work, not to fight, not to do some of the things guys do after their ring careers are over because they didn't hang on to the money, it gave him the freedom to essentially give everyone who treated him poorly the finger and say, you know, I'm out. And good for him.
And to Daniel's earlier point about how Hagler was treated outside the ring, the infamous quote from Joe that Hagler said that Joe Frazier told him, part of the reason you're going to have trouble is one, because you're good, one, because you're southpaw, two, because you're black, and three, because you're good. Paraphrasing. That wrapped him up. And to what also to both of your points about Hopkins, 90s middleweight Hopkins, it was just like a clone, an homage to Hagler. Watch some of the old videos on YouTube of Hopkins fights, pre-fight talk, and even post-fight interviews. What was the one thing that was synonymous? He said he wanted to be the 90s version of Marvin Hagler. That's how he carried himself in terms of the discipline to the trade. when you look at Hopkins and how he was during his middleweight reign, his early middleweight reign, much like Hagler, Hopkins he's wrongly represented in terms of people's analysis of him. If you want to give a true indication of what Hopkins was as a fighter, look back in the 90s. Look back at 90s Hopkins. Look back at the Joe Lipsy fights, the Bo James fights, the Andrew Council fights, Simon Brown, Glenn Johnson, those fights. That's Hopkins. You watch him fight Glenn Johnson in 1997. You shouldn't be surprised that he did what he did to Trinidad. You shouldn't.
John David
Same
Jackson.
thing with him to John David Jackson as well. Their careers are very synonymous, almost mirrors of each other in and outside of the ring. And Hagler, he was the dude. Pre-Tyson, Hagler was viewed as the baddest man on the planet. He was. He cleaned out the division. Funny story is, him and Hearns fought in 85, but they was initially scheduled to fight in 82. Hearns dropped out. Leonard often talked about fighting Hagler, but there was a reason he retired. I think in part because if they would have fought in 82, 83, Leonard would not have beat him. He would not have. I think Leonard in part was very shrewd and calculated, and I'm not saying this as a negative context, but he kind of waited out until Hagler got a little bit old. He saw a little bit of vulnerability in him, particularly in the Mugabe fight, and he was like, boom, let's make the comeback now. Let's fight him now. And he struck while he was a little bit, again, on the bit of a downside. But yeah, Hagler, you want to talk about a great representation of the sport, inside the ring, outside the ring, how to carry yourself, how to treat yourself in terms of discipline, staying in shape all year long. I mean, what was the saying, Gayle? That when he went to training camp, it was the equivalent of going to jail for him. Basically trained at what looked like a prison, an actual old broke abandoned prison to train for fights and whatnot. So he was that hard. He was that dude. He was that good. One of the greatest, more complete fighters to ever lace on a pair of gloves. And I just can't summon up enough words to show my appreciation for who he was in the ring and how he carried himself outside the ring. So yeah, on the behalf of Gayle and Daniel, we here at Pound for Pound Report rest in ultimate power to one marvelous Marvin Hagler. He will be sorely missed.
Amen.
Let's move on to talk about what was a really action-packed weekend of the 13th. Showcase fight was in the smaller weight divisions. Daniel, we talked about it a lot last week. The rematch between Gallo Estrada and Chocolatito Gonzalez. They fought in Dallas, Texas. The rematch lived up to the hype. Early candidate for Fighter of the Year. Estrada won by decision, split decision, 115-113 on two score. 115 and 117 on two scorecards. Chocolatito 115-113 on the third scorecard. We're going to get into those scorecards in a bit, but let's focus on the fight first. Who did you have winning? What was the standout points of the fight? Overall, outstanding matchup, outstanding fight all the way through.
Ooh. It was in a way probably the best. I know we talked about Marvin Hagler. This was probably as best of a tribute to him as you could do between two fighters. Just putting it out there. I was like just looking at it, I was shedding tears at the beauty that you were watching. Because you saw Chocolatito, the work rate started to kick up, particularly at the round 4. Round 4 is probably right now the early candidate round of the year. But then when Gayle was able to not only answer back, but land effectively and still be within the space of Chocolatito and not falter, when most people would probably have gone down considering the work rate of Chocolatito. Those were the telling signs to me that even though Chocolatito was starting to land a little bit, Estrada had counters, adjustments, was able to land uppercuts, hooks, in a way that you could tell rock Chocolatito later on in the fight. Just like Chocolatito rocked him at certain points in the middle of the fight. So it was a beautiful spectacle of a fight. I said it had shade. To me, it had shades of Eric Morales, Marco Benavidez, the first fight. Like, you know how at the end of the fight, if you watch the HBO broadcast, you had Jim Lampley just yell out, clapping, "Fabulous." That's what I was like. I mean, it was fabulous watching this display. And to me, let's say Gayle did enough. I know we're going to talk about the scorecard, and I know that ruined it for a lot of people, but this could have been gone either way. Like, I would have no problem if we would have went to Chocolatito in this fight. I have no problem, but I have no problem with Estrada when I picked Estrada to win. And you can tell there's confidence, and you can tell it's not a situation where, like, okay, I'm just going to wait it out, doing everything like that. They both want the rematch. They both want the rubber match now. So let's just put it out. Let's get the dates, even though we know there's some WBC-ness happening.
I would push back a little bit in terms of the comparison between Morales and Barrera, because it didn't have the anger, right? Particularly the first fight. Those two dudes fought angry that first fight. They would legit piss off at each other. They didn't like each other one bit. I do not get that sense between Estrada and Chocolatito. But I go to you, Gayle. This fight went in 3 parts. First 5 rounds, I felt that Chocolatito was outworking Estrada, right? Landing the bigger punches. And then in the middle portion, Estrada, he found his bearings, was doing a really good job of chin checking and pot shotting, got to Chocolatito. I think in the 6th round, Chocolatito seemed to show some discomfort, or have some display some discomfort over his eye, right? And he also was beginning to get hurt and wear down, but he summoned up his strength over the last third of the fight, and you just had to sit back in awe as the two men just went at each other toe to toe in a battle of wills. Could have went either way. I'll give my thoughts on that in a bit, but having a couple of days to kind of decompress based on what you saw, your reaction.
What a fight. It lived up to expectations. And how often can we say that? Not a lot. You know, we get so excited, so hyped for a lot of fights, and then there's just that letdown. It didn't go the way we thought it would. Some crazy thing happens. I mean, we had an undercard fight with a guy who broke his hand in an early round. It was just a shame. It was really an enjoyable fight, and then gone. This one was everything we hoped for. And when you've got a rematch 8 years after the fact, guys in their early 30s, which for the smaller weight divisions, the rule of thumb is that they don't age well, and that a fighter under 126 maybe, that when they get to be in their early 30s, they're really, really done. You couldn't have guessed it by these two. And we knew Estrada was, his career was still on the rise. He demonstrated, especially in that recent fight with Quadras, what he has to offer. My only consideration after that fight was, had he taken more damage than we thought? Because that was a rough fight. Chocolatito has almost risen from the boxing grave after the 2 defeats by Sor Rungvisai, especially the second knockout, which was absolutely devastating. He was the Chocolatito of old, as much as we could have ever imagined. And it was a better fight than the first fight, which is a rarity, especially with that much time gone by. Nonstop, and an absolutely tremendous display of skill, of will, courage, determination, never give up. But truly, let me go back to the skill part. When we talk about effective aggression, every young boxer needs to watch this fight with both of them. I thought Estrada won the first round. Chocolatito won easily the next 5 or 6. And Estrada won the next few. And you're right. Chocolatito had a problem in one round. It looked like something in his eyes bothering him. I'm wondering if it was just strictly Vaseline from the corner on his face. That can happen. He seemed to shake off whatever it was. What I did think was interesting is when Estrada's trainer, and their names are both, their both last names are both Caballero, said to him after the 10th round, you're losing, you need a knockout. And he had 2 rounds to go. Is that a trainer just simply willing his guy on? Did he really think that? It turned out on the cards it wasn't the case, but of course none of us would have known that. I do think it gave Estrada that closing finish. It's so important in a close fight. But Chocolatito stood right there with him. My personal cards were 116, 114, with the recognition that 115, 113 would probably be the likely scores from the judges for Roman Gonzalez. 115, 113 the other way, wouldn't have loved it, could see it. That 117, 110 card's the one, of course, everybody's focused on. But let's remember, 2 cards went Estrada's way. I just did not see that, in my opinion. I don't like to judge a fight by CompuBox stats. You know, they can be, the rule of thumb is they can be anywhere from 5 to 10% off. That's the average. You're talking about human judgment calls. But it seemed clear to me that Chocolatito landed the more accurate punches, the better punches. He buzzed Estrada a couple of times. Estrada never wobbled on his legs. He never, lost his footing. But there were 2 occasions in particular he nailed Estrada, and I don't feel that Estrada ever pushed back Chocolatito in the same way. But good fights that are close fights generate this kind of discussion almost inevitably. And the beautiful thing is we got a 3rd fight ahead of us. I mean, it must happen now. It must. And Gonzalez even seemed fairly content after the fight, saying, this is when he said this is what he wanted, he means this is what God wanted. He's always at peace after these fights, just sort of amazing. And he seems rare to go for the next one and bring it on. The question will be, what's the timing? Because of the WBC ordering Rungvisai as the mandatory. And I'm not too concerned about Rungvisai and Estrada fighting before we see a rematch to just get out of the way. I think Estrada has got Rungvisai's number. There's just certain fighters, no matter what their skill level is, there's just something that, causes one guy to just have it over the other. And I think that is true with Estrada and Rungvisai. I'm not sure I could say that with Chocolatito, even as good as he looked the other night. So let's get Rungvisai out of the way, and let's do this again in 6 months, 8 months. Big crowd instead of the small privileged crowd they had in Texas. And I'll be a happy girl.
As much as I respect Chocolatito. He don't want none of Srisakat, who fought on Friday the 12th, blew out an easy Hooper in 3 rounds. If you want for a recap of that, you can go to threekingsboxing.com. I did a recap of that. You can also check out my recap of Estrada Chocolatito 2. When I was writing the recap, watching the fight and writing the recap live, my initial reaction was, this fight is a draw. Split, 6-6 down the middle, right? But before I hit that send button and to get it published on the site, did a quick think over in my head, and I had an instant flip, and I had it for Gonzalez 115, 112, 7-5 in his favorite rounds. 2 questions here, folks. We keep mentioning. Let's go to the scores. Let's go to the scorecard. The fight was close. It could have went either way. 2 points to one guy, 2 points to the other guy. A lot of people were up in arms over the 117, 111 card by Judge Carlos Sucre. WBA has stepped in and said they want to investigate his scorecard and has temporarily suspended him. You can check out my reporting on that also on threekingsboxing.com. Shout out to the fellas there, 2K, Bo, 2K, the head guy, Bo, the head of media relations, Big Cool, Bakari, myself, senior writers, Red, the editor. Your thoughts on what the WBA has decided to do with their quote-unquote investigation? To me, what is this really going to prove? It comes off as a little bit of, I know people are upset, but it comes off as grandstanding. I don't think anything is going to come out of this, even if they suspend him permanently or ban him for judging any WBA sanctioned bouts. Estrada's going to keep the belt anyway. So what's the point?
Well, this is not the first time that WBA President Gilberto Mendoza has done this. If you'll recall, in 2017, the WBA suspended 2 judges over the scores in the Hassan Andam Ryota Murata fight, which is an absolute, complete robbery. Crazy. They ordered a rematch, and sure enough, Murata beat Andam with the 7th round TKO after the first fight. The first fight was an absolute disaster. We don't have quite the same level of disaster. I do appreciate the sanctioning bodies speaking up when something like this happens. It's morally important. It's important to recognize when there is a problem like this. I wish they'd be a little more punitive when this happens with judges, but at least they're bringing it to light. They're getting everyone to talk about it. They're calling it out. That's important for the fans and for everybody else to recognize that this should not happen. Here's my objection to that 117 card. Virtually everyone I've talked to and the other 2 judges, no matter how they scored the fight, agreed that other than the first round, the early rounds went to Gonzalez. Sucre scored all, I believe, the first 4 or 5 rounds for Estrada. What was he watching? Did he pencil it in ahead of time so he could just take it easy? That's the thing that turns people off to boxing, and calling it out, regardless of whether it, changes history or not officially, on BoxRec, on the score sheet. It would be nice if that happened where appropriate, and I'm not saying it is necessarily here, but it's important to do. They can't just say, "Oh well," and let it go, and they didn't, and they have precedent for it, and I applaud them for it.
What say you, Daniel?
It's difficult to judge in a way because Not so much the scorecard, because, like I said, that one scorecard ruined the fight for a lot of people. And like I said, it's a little bit. You would literally have to give every single swing route to Gayle in order to get that scorecard. And in all fairness, you can't do that. Now, the action that I understand the symbolism, the WBA symbolically is trying to do something to investigate, but the reality of it is, if you want an actual suspension that's substantive, you got to go to the commissions. You got to go to the athletic commissions, to make sure that, in this case, Carlos Sucre doesn't judge a fight, in this case, in the state of Texas again. Because all this does right now is, okay, it does limit in WBA bouts. Okay. So does that mean that the IBF, the WBO, and the WBC have to put him there? No, because it depends on what the judges are going to do. And a lot of times they can make suggestions, but we know the athletic commissions most of the time pick the judges. They just have to be, like I said, they have to be licenses or by the sanctioning bodies. It's bad in a way that Mendoza had to do that the backlash was that bad that you had to do that almost immediately. I just wish like it had a bit more teeth to it. So if they bring it up, and whether it's in the next meeting with the Texas Athletic Commission or the next time that they have a major fight between them, they had to bring it up, because there's unfortunately too many cases where some scorecards just look obscene. Like, this is just the latest one. Let's not forget that Adelaide Bird scorecard. The Canelo, I think it was Canelo Triple G, the first fight, the one that people were just so shocked by. Those are the things that need to be fixed. And I'm glad the WBA did it. I just wish it had more teeth. I think we lost Mike.
We did lose Mike. The WBA powers that be shot him down. Yeah, Daniel. I remember that card well. Adelaide Bird's 118-110 card for Canelo in a fight that, to this day, like I think will play out for a lot of people for Saturday's fight. Most people believe Golovkin won the first fight and drew the second fight. Although if you say that Golovkin won the first one and Canelo won the second one, I'm good with you. But that was not a 118-110 fight. And, judged sports, boxing is not the only one. Judged sports always have a problem, because it's the human frailty. It's human error. It's the way that we all see things differently. If human beings judging, this stuff's going to happen, but it just can't be that egregious. And I've been intrigued by some of the ideas the WBC has proposed.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, folks. I lost connection. I lost connection there on my end. Slight technical
difficulty. We're still talking about those scorecards and potential remedies for any of the times that these things happen. They do happen. They do tick off people with boxing, but they do with lots of judged sports. Listen to soccer fans howl when they're watching one of the major organizations, Premier League, La Liga, and they think a referee gets something wrong, or football, NFL referee gets something wrong. It is the equivalent of something that can turn the outcome of the event, and human intervention is going to be that way. It's interesting to see that, driven by the pandemic, tennis, starting with the Australian Open, did away with human line judges, and they are doing it now all by machine. and the players love it. Love it. So what's the equivalent in boxing? I don't know. They've talked about putting sensors in gloves forever. I don't think that's going to solve much. But I do think the discussion is valuable in keeping discussion alive and recognizing it is a problem. Someday somebody's going to stumble onto something that will help. I remain an optimist.
Sorry for the technical glitch on my end. I'm back now. Let's get to the issue that most people want to talk about outside of the scorecard. We have mentioned Sor Rungvisai's name a lot within this breakdown of Estrada Gonzalez 2. By rule, Sor Rungvisai is due to be Estrada's next opponent. He's the mandatory contender according to the WBC. But am I wrong in thinking that most folks would like to see a trilogy between Estrada would like to see Estrada Gonzalez 3 before a Srisakat Estrada 3, or before a trilogy between either Srisakat and Estrada or Srisakat and Chocolatito?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong in that aspect. And like I mentioned it, both Chocolatito and Estrada want that next in order to come to it. Now, the only issue, I think somebody mentioned, I think Eddie Hearn mentioned it, from WBC, is just that WBC would strip. But then it produces another really decent fight, because who would be the next two in the WBC that would be mandated to fight for the vacant title if they strip Estrada? Obviously, we know Rungvisai, mandatory, and Carlos Cuadras. So even if WBC pulls some chicanery, you still might get a decent fight out of this. And you would get the trilogy. You would get a really good fight between Rungvisai and Cuadras, because that would be Cuadras was pretty much his last shot at staying a major player in the division. And then the winner of those two can meet. So it does present good avenues into it. I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't mind either way, whether you do the rematch immediately or if you have Estrada take the Rungvisai fight afterwards, because I agree with Gayle. Like, this is just, when it comes to fighters, for Rungvisai, I think I mentioned it in the Friday chat, Estrada is Paulo Ayala in a way. That one fighter, or a really good fighter, you just can't beat. For some reasons, he just has your number. And that'll be an interesting play. I don't mind it. I don't mind it goes either way. I just hope we just have crowds again for this one. Bigger crowds for this. And maybe American Airlines Arena started to give Chocolatito a home crowd advantage in a way.
I'll go to you, Gayle. Mandatory obligations withstanding, would you rather see Estrada Chocolatito 3?
I'm not troubled by the mandatory. Honestly, it gives an advantage, in my opinion, to Roman Gonzalez to have a little bit more of a break, depending on how quickly the Rungvisai fight is scheduled with Estrada. And I really do think Estrada has no problems with him at all. Estrada wiped the floor with him in their last fight. However, we do know that crazy stuff happens in boxing. There's always the propensity for injury, some other crazy thing to happen. And hey, Rungvisai is, although I would definitely not favor him, he's a live dog, absolutely. He could upset things. And I don't really want to see Rungvisai and Chocolatito. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But I'm not super troubled by it if the rematch isn't next. And I perceived Estrada's opinion as, whatever works out, not necessarily I want Chocolatito next. I think he's willing to play with the WBC and see what happens.
Let's move on to more fights here. We're going to split this up because I see even Gayle, Gayle's dog is even excited about the prospect of these two cats going at it for a third time.
Yeah. He's ready to go.
Going back to you, Gayle, to talk about this undercard. Jessica McCaskill became Fighter of the Year, Women's Fighter of the Year, largely off of her upset win over Cecilia Braekhus to win the undisputed welterweight title. The two ladies fought a rematch on the undercard of Estrada Gonzalez 2. Tough fight. McCaskill, she jumped on Braekhus, hurt Braekhus early, ended up getting the decision. I don't know what to think about this fight. I was like, okay, she won, but I was a little bit disappointed in Braekhus and her performance. What did you really draw from this fight about both McCaskill and Braekhus moving forward?
I'm glad you put it that way, Michael. I kind of found myself scratching my head a little bit too. Due credit to McCaskill. She took it on. She was aggressive. She was every bit as good and then some as she was in the first fight. Braekhus passed the eye test. She looked great. She looked focused. She looked ready. And she had not that many more answers for McCaskill as she did in the first fight. And maybe it's one of those things where, like Estrada has Rungvisai's number, McCaskill just simply has Braekhus's number. Or maybe it's simply that, in her late 30s, she has to acknowledge that she simply slowed down enough to where a young, hungry, strong woman just got the better of her. And she seemed to take it a little too easily, in my opinion. She almost shrugged off the fact she'd lost. And unlike the first fight, not only did not hint at retiring, said, no, I love this. I'm going to keep going. That was a little perplexing for someone who really, just lacked in the ring. I was incredibly disappointed. There's the other factor, it's one of those homilies in boxing, it was a lot like I was reminded earlier in our discussion that among the most famous sayings in boxing is, that somebody getting comfortable sleeping on silk sheets, doesn't have the will to perform anymore. And that's a Marvin Hagler quote. Another homily of boxing is that when you are the champion, when you hold the belts, your performance improves 10%. And I think, looking at McCaskill and Braekhus, I agree that that's true. I think that's also what we saw. It's that extra confidence. It's the belief. You've got to win the fight in your mind before you step in. And when you step in loaded down with belts, that's where it can come from. So bravo to McCaskill. Now she's, potentially got the juice to get that rematch she wants with Katie Taylor. And I think that would be incredibly exciting to watch.
It's certainly the biggest fight for her out there where she could make the most money, the most natural matchup for her. Katie Taylor, who's the undisputed lightweight champion. I can't remember if she still has that belt at 140. The two ladies fought a couple of years ago. Katie Taylor won, but she also said that McCaskill was her toughest opponent. McCaskill's manager, trainer Ramos, he certainly wants to fight. He's talking about McCaskill making a possible $1 million for that bout. So Eddie Hearn, I don't think he would be against putting the two ladies in the ring. It's the most natural matchup right now outside a fight with possibly Katie Taylor and Serrano. We all know how that negotiations for that went down the tube last year, and I still don't get why that just blew up in everybody's faces. But yeah, that's the fight. That's the fight for McCaskill right now. And for Braga, she says she wants to continue on, but I don't know. She's had a long reign as well. She had a long reign at welterweight champion. She's 38, 39 years old. What more is left for her to do out there? If she can't beat McCaskill at 147, I don't see her moving up to 154. She's small. I don't see her getting down to 140. So what's there? We'll see where she goes. I'll go to you. I'll go back to you. I'll go back to you on this one, Daniel. Koiguchi, the WBA flyweight champion, Hiroto Koiguchi, light flyweight champion, I should say. He made his U.S. debut on this card against a guy by the name of Vega. The fight ended in the 5th round due to injury to Vega. In looking at this fight, is the only word to describe this fight is incomplete?
In a way, yes, because while Koguchi was landing shots, Vega, before the injury, was starting to get to Koguchi's body. He was starting to land body shots at a consistent pace. And it was one of the areas where his height, being 4'9", would actually be a strength in this case because
that's amazing. He's shorter than Jake Matlala. Oh gosh.
He is technically shorter than my niece. That's saying something. My niece is 11 years old. So, but the main thing about it is like he was landing good shots, and it's just one of those freak injuries right after landing that type of tempo shot, and you knew it was an injury as soon as he turned around. And referee did what he needed to do to stop it, even though Koguchi landed a free shot. But then again, Koguchi didn't know that it was an injury. He did what you're supposed to do. It is protect yourself at all times. It's tough to protect yourself, though, when you're in that amount of pain. And you could tell he was in a severe amount of pain with that injury. And I feel bad because he has earned at least another shot at Koguchi. I don't know at the rate that the fight was going. If it wasn't for that injury, there could have been a chance that Vega may have worn Koguchi down with body shots. Would it have been enough to win the fight? We don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. We know that maybe Vega is a little bit of an issue, at least as far as when it comes to Koguchi's defenses to the body. Or Koguchi probably would have finished him off in the later rounds because he's naturally the bigger, stronger guy. But we have to see because go down to 105, try to get a shot there because I mentioned that there was history in the line. There was the shortest fighter, like I said, would have dethroned Lamada. And amazing enough, because I thought David Haney was this, but Vega would be the first fighter born this century that's a champion. Every other champion is just barely in the 90s.
Wow.
But so that's a lot to take, yeah. So they can run it by again, but I could see like Koguchi's handlers probably steer clear of that though.
Wow. The fact that he was born in 2000, that makes me feel really, really old. I just have to say it.
I think unless you're in high school right now, you can feel old.
Yeah. In terms of the stuff about his height, the reason I mentioned baby Jake Matlala at 4'10" is on record as the shortest world champion in the history of the sport. Vega, he's shorter than Matlala at 4'9", and so it would be it would have been interesting if he would have won. He would have been the shortest world. He would have eclipsed Jacob Matlala as the shortest world champion. In terms of Koiguchi, I don't know if we'll see this rematch of a fight between these two again because this was kind of a voluntary defense. Koiguchi has technically a fight against, I can't pronounce the fighter's name. I can't pronounce his name. He's from Thailand. Anyway, this Thai fighter, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. They were set to fight last November of last year, but Koiguchi, the day of the fight against the Thai fighter, tested positive for COVID. Um, so they took this fight. So let me rewind. Koiguchi tested positive right against the Thai fighter. Shortly after that, he signed a deal with Matchroom, and the agreement was that they will fight Vega, with the winner set to fight the Thai number one contender next. So I think that's the route where Koiguchi may go. So unfortunately for Vega, he may be left out in the cold here, as Koiguchi will probably move on to make the number one, uh, make a defense against the number one contender. It sucks for him, but unfortunately, that's the business of boxing. Um, Sadly, uh, the Matchroom has too much invested in him. They're going to get that mandatory out of the way, and then hopefully try to move Koiguchi on to bigger and better things. Let's move on to some other action here. I'm going back to you, Daniel, to talk about this fight. David Benavidez fought. Oh gosh, the name escapes me right quick.
Ron Ellis.
Ron Ellis. I'm thinking Rashidi Ellis. Ronald Ellis. He fought. The fight was stopped in the 11th round. Ronald Ellis, tougher than a lot of people gave him credit for, made Benavidez work. But I like this kind of performance for Benavidez because he was challenged a bit. It forced him to bring out pretty much close to his best. Benavidez was in shape for this bout. No issues making the weight. He made weight days before. Uh, I know he's messed himself up losing the WBC title, but I have to say he's right up there at 168 pounds. I think he can fight with anyone, including Canelo. Your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, it had the ending people thought it was going to have. It just had it much later than a lot of people had. I think most of us probably thought the Benavidez would probably take care of this in 5 rounds, but you have to give it to Ellis. He never actually went down in the fight, and he actually showed a good amount of promise with combinations and with the jab in the first round. He actually, in a lot of cards, I think this Steve Barhood's card won the first round. But after that, it became elementary. Like for anything that Ellis tried to do, Benavidez either answered with one of those like 4 or 5 pound combinations that he has, unleash at random times, or like a quick body shot. It just became elementary at a certain point. And even like I said, even had Ellis's corner, tell him like you. I think it was in the between the 8th or 9th round. I forgot if maybe I've been in those rounds, or between the 9th and the 10th, where his corner was pretty much saying, "We're only giving you 1 round. You need to do something. You need to do something." Because Ellis wasn't doing too much. He did enough in the 10th round to get into that, but he knew the paintings on the wall. He needed a knockout, but Benavidez took care of business, and he's pretty much right now for him as far as WBC. We have to see how that goes. Or in the case of the PBC, let's face it. Like I know he called out Maul, but right now all roads with him lead to Caleb Plant. That's not Robert Brant. Well, not Caleb Plant. I think I'm confusing now those names now for some reason. But all roads lead to him in the IBF, pretty much, because that's going to be.
Plant's not going to fight him.
Yeah,
Plant's not going to fight him. Plant's going to wait for the Canelo sweepstakes.
But that's the thing. That's going to be the interesting thing. If he waits a little bit longer, Benavidez probably may force his hand, because Benavidez seems to be like one of Al's favorites. So they might just force the issue, because let's face it, that's probably right now the only way right now Benavidez gets a shot with Canelo.
I'll go to you, Gayle, right quick. Quickly, your thoughts on this, and not just the fight, but the future of David Benavidez. Canelo is on a mission to unify all the belts at 168 pounds. He's fighting Billy Joe Saunders next in May. You got Plant out there, IBF champion. Like I said, I think he's going to wait until uh, he gets the winner of Canelo and Saunders. Where does David Benavidez actually go? I know he's talking about fighting Maul, but you don't hear Maul out there talking with great sense of urgency to fight him.
No, he doesn't. I think we're going to wait before Canelo and Benavidez get it on, definitely until next year. And, Benavidez is very young still. I'm okay with that. And I have my concerns about him. I like his skills. I like what he has to present. There's still a question mark in a lot of people's minds about his work ethic, his dedication. He's always vows after he makes a mistake. Well, I've learned from that. I'm not going to do that again. Trust but verify. Where it comes to Benavidez, is he going to straighten up and leverage all of the natural talent he seems to have? Or is he going to devolve to this generation's Chavez Jr.? God, I hope not. I really hope not. His father has his head on straight. His brother has his head on straight. David is the youngster. He's the baby of the boxing family. I think when he's got very serious goals, he is better off. But I think we're going to get Plant against Canelo first. I mean, come on, that is low-hanging fruit for Canelo. I really don't see Plant being any kind of challenge to him. So if he wants to unify the belts, well, hell, why wouldn't he? That's what makes the Plant fight attractive. There's a belt attached. Benavidez, one of the big mistakes preventing him from getting a fight with Canelo is he blew the belt on the scale.
Right.
That's the problem. I do think Benavidez would be a challenge to Canelo, but I think he'd be a bigger challenge with a little more time, a little bit more man strength. He's still only 23 years old. I think he can fill out a little more, but the question is, he's going to have trouble making 168. So maybe he's a more rational competitor for Canelo down the road at light heavyweight. The guy I see being the biggest problem for Canelo, if he is brave enough to do this, and I think Canelo is brave enough to take this on, is a clash down the road with, yes? Did you have something to stop me?
I said Andrade. Andrade is his toughest fight.
No. Andrade's too small.
Andrade at 160, Beterbiev at 175.
No. I'll tell you who could beat Canelo. It's Dimitri Bivol, because it's the style matchup. Bivol will give him fits, and Bivol can easily make 168. I know Bivol very well. I've worked with him. That guy, he makes absolutely zero effort whatsoever to stay under 175. Getting to 168 for him would be a breeze. He is a small light heavyweight, and he is a tricky guy. He has bested all of the light heavyweights he's fought. Have they been the most exciting fights? No, they have not. But Bivol is smart enough not to bang with those guys if he doesn't have to. And his skill set is such, he doesn't have to. Let's look back at the fight with Kovalev, a washed Kovalev with no power. Kovalev still has more boxing skills, even at that age and state of his career, than most people give him credit for. And that's why Canelo was losing to him on the cards through the first 2/3 of the fight. But Bivol is young enough and crafty enough to make it stick. So I think that's a very doable fight. World of Boxing, Bivol's management team has good arrangements with Matchroom. Interesting fight. It's certainly not the next fight either. Canelo's dance card is filled for 2021 as far as I'm concerned. I do really like the fact that it looks like Gilberto Ramirez and Bivol's teams are talking about a fight. That's a good fight for both of them, and it's a fight both of them need to get their names back in the mix.
Let's move on to some news here. We talked about this last week, a bit of an update in regards to Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury. We're going to give a further update as well. I'm just going to throw it out there. Shout out to Bakari over at Three Kings. He wrote about this earlier this morning, put it over on threekingsboxing.com. Actually beat me to the story. He beat me to the punch getting this story out there, but he's a good dude. Shout out to Bakari. Joshua Fury have basically signed a contract to a 2-fight deal to crown the undisputed heavyweight champion. No further details more than that in terms of location or date, but I guess the next step towards the two possibly getting into the ring. The contract is signed. Gayle, Daniel, your thoughts on it?
Well, that's the caveat, because apparently it looks like they have exactly 4 weeks to decide the date and the venue. Otherwise, that contract is about as worth as much as an NFL contract. And in case people don't know, an NFL contract is not worth the toilet paper is written on. So it's just another update that, to me, that means literally nothing. Because how many times in the past 4 months we've said, oh, it's all done. It's all done. It's already packed in. All of this is that, okay, you gave it to SportsCenter, but you gave no details. This to me, and this is probably me being the cynic in this case, to me, this is just smoke and mirrors, trying to move the goalposts right along until you get a point where you actually get the maybe to probably prevent the WBO from stripping Joshua, because they very well might. Joshua already fulfilled the IBF mandatory. That's normally the biggest danger to unifying fights. But he took care of that with beating Pulev. The WBO situation is a little bit hairy, though, because they could strip him, and then you could have Joe Joyce versus Usyk fight for the vacant title. And if Joe Joyce beats Usyk, there will be no way in hell he'll ever step foot in the ring with the winner of a Fury and Tyson fight. And you're gonna have what's supposed to be an undisputed heavyweight champion not happening. To me, that's trying a way to stall that. But if you don't have a date, if you don't have a slate, if you don't have a site right now, like I said, the cynic in me says this is nothing but smoke and mirrors.
You share Daniel's skepticism, Gayle?
I sure do. I think this announcement was a lot of smoke and mirrors. I'm not saying anybody's lying about anything. I'm thinking the promoters both know fans are getting agitated and concerned about this fight. And Fury himself, is mouthing off quite a bit. God knows Bob Arum has worked with a lot of fighters that are tough to control, and Tyson Fury's one of them. What he also knows is that Fury's been out of the ring a while, and we all know Fury has admitted over and over that it's important for his mental health and his physical health to stay busy and stay in training and stay in the gym. And the longer time stretches out between fights, this is not to Fury's benefit. Everybody knows it. So there's this shaky feeling around this fight. Now, I'm thinking things are progressing. It's a big money fight. There's a ton of lawyers involved. They're all billing hours and making money on this thing, and they're just chewing this contract over. I'm sure it's still on track, just as it was. I am skeptical there's anything more in writing, specifically, since we have not heard a date and we have not heard a venue, Those seem kind of critical to me, especially in the pandemic where so much is being controlled by where and when and how many people can be at these places. So, what did we really learn today that was new, that moved the needle forward? Nothing. I think this was just their effort to get everyone to calm down without realizing that, the emperor was really not wearing any clothes today. There was just no real news there. Nothing's definitive. They didn't announce signed, sealed, done deal, finished, dotted line, contract in place, it's X date and it's in Dubai. No, we didn't hear any of that. Everybody has to look very coolly and carefully at what they were shown and told and realize ain't nothing to see. We're still waiting.
And of course, we're here at Pound for Pound Box Report. We'll keep you updated with any further developments regarding this very fluid situation. Moving on to more news here. German Nakajas, who is IBF 115-pound champion, actually in the junior bantamweight division, despite all of our talk about Estrada, about Quadras, about Srisakatsu running beside. It is Nkanhas who is currently the longest reigning champion in the sport, has held that title since September 2016. He returns to the ring in April, going to fight at the Mohegan Sun, April 10th, against a Mexican by the name, I want to say Rodriguez. But the big story here is that Nkanhas has left Top Rank and has signed a deal with PBC. Nkanhas, he wants to fight Estrada. Your thoughts, Daniel, on Nkanhas deciding to leave Top Rank for what he hopes are the greener pastures of the PBC?
Well, if his goal is fighting Gallo, he went the wrong route. Because I don't know if this is maybe like a Pacquiao type situation where he probably heard Pacquiao being treated better in the PBC, so he's willing to do that. But at this stage, no, because if we've noticed, it's not exactly a gusher of fights between PBC and matchroom fighters, or fighters that fight on the zone versus fighters that fight at PBC that are starting to spring up. If anything, that's the strongest right now, one of the strongest walls in the boxing Cold War. So I don't know who gave him advice into, but I think it was the wrong advice. This is pretty, if anything, this is all just means that, okay, and we're gonna give you fighters, we're gonna feed you fighters that'll keep your title reign, but you're gonna be that one guy that's always sticking out, the one guy that is always, like I said, left out of the major talks. He's gonna be probably right now the new. Well, he already is in a way, but like the new Devin Alexander when he had the IBF welterweight title. Yushin Butte, but granted, Butte did it to himself in a way when he was like the lone guy in the IBF. I really do feel bad for Iconics making this move. And it just feels like, okay, somebody fed him the wrong information, and now he's probably in no man's land in WBC as far as that division is concerned.
Surprised by this move, Gayle?
Yeah, I am a little bit. I can't help but feel that it's sort of the IBF super flyweight equivalent of Terrence Crawford in the welterweight division, just hanging out to dry without a dance partner. It makes me wonder, who does he have his sights set on? Is he thinking he's going to fight the winner of Estrada and Rungvisai and hoping it's Rungvisai and the fight takes place in Asia maybe? Is he going to stay at super flyweight? He has fought at super flyweight. Gosh, I think Trying to think. I think his entire career. I think except for maybe his first few fights, which is 10 plus years ago, he is one of the smaller weight division guys who's really stayed in the same weight division. He's almost 30. Is he contemplating a move upward? It isn't a whole lot above where he is, where there's a whole lot more action. It's hard to say. He's not a big super flyweight either. He's 5'6". He's right there. I mean, there's a reason he sat on this weight for so long. You have to wonder what he was promised to move over. But clearly, he's not getting the fights he wants. He had the pandemic year completely off. He hasn't had a fight since December 2019. He hasn't fought back in Asia, and the closest he really came was Australia. His last fight in the Philippines was 5 years ago against Mick Joe Arroyo. So hard to say what's in his future. He's a good little fighter. If you're thinking about the Four Kings versions of the super flyweights, he's really just below them. I would even put Carlos Cuadras above him. And maybe that's the problem, that, he's just the odd man out. I wish him well. I hope we do get to see him in the ring soon. It's been a long time, and fans outside of Asia are kind of going to forget about him if he doesn't get in there. And maybe PBC promised to keep him busy the rest of the year, and maybe that was enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's going to be, if he, to your point, Gail, Gilberto Ramirez-like, in terms of being viewed as an afterthought amongst a allotment of big names within his division. Maybe it was just a mutual agreement between Cajas and Arum to part ways, but they just didn't disclose that publicly. What he can gain from PBC is unknown. He's good enough to get those big fights. The question, to compete again with the likes of Estrada, to compete with the likes of Gonzalez, to compete with the likes of Ioka, the WBO champion. The question becomes, will he ever get those opportunities? It remains to be seen. One last story here before we start previewing fights here. And this is spur of the moment. I didn't put it in the docket. I'm just going to throw it out there and see how you respond. Danny Garcia, speaking to Fight Hype. For those who don't know, Danny Garcia, former champion, unified champion at 140, former world champion at 147. Speaking of Fight Hype, was asked about his future. And I'm going to paraphrase here. He says that he would like to go to 154. He could see a fight between him and Keith Thurman at that weight. He says he's fought everybody at 140. He's fought just about everybody at 147. But he feels like the next chapter in his career is at 154. Your thoughts?
I am wondering. You sense my enthusiasm, don't you? I've never been very high on Danny Garcia. I know there are a lot of people that give him his props and think that he's plenty skilled, and despite the losses on his record, there's something there. I've just never been very enthusiastic about him, and I certainly haven't been enthusiastic about him, at the higher weight divisions. It's just not a good look on him. There are plenty of young welterweights he could be fighting, and he could be their gatekeeper. I'm not sure why he doesn't want to take some of those guys on, except that it's a money issue. I mean, he is right that he and Thurman could get bigger paychecks fighting each other. And if their only excuse for making it happen is to go up to 154, I mean, it's kind of a head scratcher to me, but okay. But, they're just the tiniest notch. And I mean, the teeniest, imagine my fingers just pushed together. The teeniest little tiny step just below seeing Tyson and Jones Jr. If they both just, plump up to 154 and bang away. What's the point? Really? you got, I mean, feed one of those guys to Virgil Ortiz Jr. for Pete's sake, who we're going to see this weekend. Some of those other young welterweight studs, well, they don't want none of that. I get it. So I think they have to both give very serious consideration to their careers. I'm not convinced we're ever going to really see Keith Thurman in another big fight. I think he's got one foot out the door. And you know what? If that's what he wants, power to him. But
Swift possibly moving up to 154. Daniel, is it a situation where it's like, yeah, okay, but who really cares?
Jesus. I want to say this nicely. I want to keep the show PG.
No, what? There's no fun in that.
Fine. Fine. I'll do it.
Do it.
Danny Garcia has no motherfucking business at 154. No motherfucking
Don't you
business.
feel better now? Don't you feel better saying that? I know you do.
No, it's like he doesn't. Like, what are you gonna do there? Like, okay, you've already proven that your best is probably at 140. And even at 140, you were given a gift decision against Mauricio Herrera.
That is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then absolutely the truth. And you would, many people think against Matisse too.
That one was a close because people just wanted Matisse to knock him out. And just because Matisse wasn't able to do it, it helped in that manner. But the thing, unfortunately, with Danny is, and I've always said this when it comes to Danny, is it's both his biggest strength and his biggest weakness. He's a fighter that doesn't do any one particularly thing great, but he does everything well. And that'll help you along in some areas, but in some divisions, it will not. 154 is one of those divisions. Because if you want to be at 154, and if Danny wants to try to keep hyping himself up as, like I said, one of the best Philly fighters out there, J-Rock's waiting. He's just chilling somewhere in Philly. You can make a fight with that, but J-Rock would probably mop the floor with Danny Garcia. Just on size and strength and height. There's a good chance that Danny could outbox him, but there's certain divisions where we've seen it with some fighters. We've seen it with Lomachenko at lightweight, where your power plateaus. It's just there are guys that are bigger than you, that are maybe stronger than you, and your power no longer just translates into those divisions. That's going to be the case of Danny in 154. So I would say, unless it's Angel feeding stuff into his ear, saying that you don't need to take these fights as being the gatekeeper, you're the great Danny Garcia and things like that. No. Accept your role. You're gonna get paid no matter what. Like I mentioned in the previous segment, you're one of Al's favorites. He's gonna pay you no matter what. Just accept where you are now, and or you can just leave, because you know what? Honestly, the faster we get Angel Garcia out of the sport, the better.
I think Daniel is saying, in short, Angel Garcia, know your role and shut your mouth, to quote Rock. And yeah, Angel Garcia. If he was to get out of the paint right now, no one would miss him. His shtick has worn. He's not shocking anybody anymore. People would dismiss him as just a mouth, and that's what largely he is at this point. So Garcia, he says he's moving up to 154, but I don't think there's going to be a clamoring of attention for him to see him fight in that division. Hell, I don't even know if there's a clamoring of attention for see him fight at 147 anymore. Real talk. Let's move on to start previewing some fights here. I'm going to split these fights up because we're running a little long. Um, Going to you, Gayle. Let's start off with the unified light heavyweight champion, Artur Beterbiev, finally making his return to the ring in his home country of Russia, fighting Adam Deines. Fight is going to be on ESPN Saturday afternoon, March 20th. Uh, is Deans a candidate for no hope, for Bob Hope's cousin, no hope against someone with the power and the strength of Beterbiev?
I have failed this show because I failed to look up how you say no hope in Russian. Somebody help me out there if you're listening. Yeah, this is this is a nice homecoming fight for Beterbiev. Get in front of his fans. These are good fights for guys like that. Keeps them busy in between the really tough contests. It's his equivalent of Canelo and Ilderim, right? It's about the same. However, it's only Monday. This fight is so snake bit. It keeps being pushed off the calendar. So I'm just crossing my fingers that by the time y'all listening 4 days from now, that this fight is still a go. But yeah, come on. Nobody needs to be fooled about what it is. Enjoy it. Enjoy watching him for as long as it lasts. It might not go longer than Hagler Hearns, I would say. Well, and we'll get a chance to see some undercards. So props to ESPN for picking it up and letting North American audiences get a look. But it's really meant for the hometown fans in Russia, and that's a good thing.
On the same day as that bout, this fight is going to take place. Excuse me, later on in the evening. Daniel, um, on paper, it's Virgil Ortiz's toughest opponent. As Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s toughest opponent, as he's going to fight former junior welterweight champion Maurice Hooker, 12-round welterweight contest. I look at this. I know on paper it says one thing in terms of this fight, but the reality is I don't trust Hooker. He gets hits too much. I've seen him get hurt, and I've seen him get hit and get hit a lot. Um, Ortiz Jr. is very, very talented, right? Has the look of a future champion. I think from a power perspective, I think from a strength perspective, I think from a skill perspective, he's going to be too much for Hooker. Only chance that Hooker has is to land a big punch. Uh, that's his only shot in this fight, in my opinion. But because other than that, uh, I see the young but very talented Ortiz winning, and I could see a stoppage here on his behalf.
It might even top his, like I said, his most thrilling stoppage, the one like the aforementioned Mauricio Herrera, the guy who normally didn't fall down a lot. He mopped the floor with him. This could be a similar case when it comes to it, but you mentioned it, Mike, in the beginning. On paper, is his toughest opponent. On paper, but paper can actually help you in this case because we talked about the situation Arcanis put himself through. We know the situation Bud is into. I said Virgil is in that same space, in that area, but the same spot as Bud in a way where there's a lot of dance partners, but they're all on one side of the street, and they're not, and their parents are not too keen on letting them cross the street. But this is a fight to further along and to have force the issue, to force the issue into making eliminators, force the issue to start getting him into mandatory shots where he has to face then whichever fighter holds the belt, whether it's Spence, whether it's Bud, somebody that you put yourself in that picture because I don't honestly I don't looking at it just the way with the pandemic's working and just how scheduling is and how we're acting here in the US, unfortunately. But I don't see like Ortiz like being in that spot where he could say he can challenge a world title at the end of the year, but this is a good first step in making the case for it. And that's what this fight's gonna serve. short of a let's face it, a lucky shot by Hooker, Ron Chin, which can happen. Which can happen. Lucky shots or shots out of nowhere can happen. Brandon Lee can attest to that in that showbox card this week or last week. I'm sorry, but that's probably gonna be, like I said, the first major stepping stone for Virgil and for Oscar in a way, because let's face it, as a promoter, he needs it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. He needs this. He needs this. Is Ortiz is the most talented prospect on his stable. Sorry, Ryan Garcia fans, but truth hurts sometimes. Um, he needs Ortiz to win, and he needs Ortiz to preferably win in a sensational fashion. We will see whether he can do that against Hooker. Last bout on the docket, the preview. Before we close things, because it's a world title fight, quote unquote, we have to discuss it. But man, I really don't want to. As Lawrence Okoli fighting Krzysztof Golowacki for the vacant cruiserweight title that Usyk let go to move up to heavyweight. I mean, look, it is what it is with Okoli. Um, he's the cure for insomnia, right? Uh, his style, not that great to watch. If you were to call him outright boring, I'm not going to argue with you. Uh, he's fighting Glowacki, who I believe is a former champion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Here's my question: How much time, how much attention will you try to devote, Gail, to even attempting to watch this fight?
Well, come on, we're all boxing degenerates. We'll watch just about anything. And Kowalski he's capable of a good fight. I don't know though. I got weeds in my yard I got to pull, and I think somebody's calling me outside.
You're going to in other words, you could conveniently find something more important than this fight.
Listen, I'll be in my house in my pandemic bunker still. It'll be on. Will I be sitting there glued taking notes? No, I will not. But I'll keep I'll keep half an eye on it just to see what's happening. But it is not the marquee fight of the weekend. Do not miss seeing Virgil Ortiz Jr. The rest of the fights this weekend, actually the best, the other excellent fight this weekend is Senicia Estrada against Annabelle Ortiz, longtime Mexican champion. That's a good women's fight. A really good
That's
one.
right. My apologies for omitting that bout. That's going to be on the undercard of Ortiz Hooker, correct?
Yes, sir. So that's the card to watch. And Virgil Ortiz, as much attention as Ryan Garcia gets at the Golden Boy stable for a lot of reasons that are legit, and his appeal to a certain demographic due to his social media celebrity standing cannot be denied. A lot of fighters have played on their celebrity standing. Sugar Ray Leonard, who we talked about earlier in this particular episode, Oscar De La Hoya, we all know who they are. Garcia is following in their footsteps, but most serious fans acknowledge that the real talent in that stable is Virgil Ortiz Jr. Watch and enjoy him now.
I have to work Saturday. I may check my Twitter thread to see who wins this fight between Okoli and Glowacki. Um, that's about it. What say you, Daniel?
Well, my mom has to get her second vaccine, and she does have an appointment for the 20th. And the drive from where it's supposed to be from my house to where we're supposed to get this appointment is about half an hour. So I think I've got about an hour, maybe 1.5, 2 hours of my time are going to be occupied by that. because not to mention she just had knee surgery, so she's not as mobile as normally. And what do you know? It's about the same time. The appointment's about the same time as a colleague.
Ah, darn it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. But it's on the zone, so I don't have to DVR it. But oh god, there's just some stinkers. There's just some stinkers in that area. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm between this and what Parker Fall ultimately wound up becoming. Yeah, I have some probably other priorities need to care. I don't have to watch it live. I can watch it later. And we mentioned there's always YouTube and Daily Motion for the highlights, which unfortunately with a collate, almost anything can be considered a highlight in this case. But you're right. Gavansky, Mike is the former WBO champion. I think he's the guy. Yeah, he is the guy that beat Marco Hook and stopped Hook from getting that record for most defenses. And like I said, it's a champion. And he was in, like I said, he was in the original World Boxing Super Series in that cruiserweight division. So it's a good way to get his title back. And maybe if they decide to do it again this year, I wouldn't mind a cruiserweight tournament, but please, Kawaki, please win. Don't be boring. Because if I have to see Lawrence Collier as a WBO cruiserweight champion, no, just no. I do not want to put. Granted, he's not in the same category as Terry Flanagan is, because Terry Flanagan made me visibly angry with the stunts that he's pulled.
We say all this about Okoli, but don't be surprised if he wins. Don't be surprised if he wins. So sorry, UK fans and Okoli supporters out there that are less than excitement over his fights. But for those who've seen him fight, you understand why we have the reaction we have towards him. And I think we're going to close the show on that moment. We're going to go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first, always. Going to end the show with ladies first, as always. Gayle from Communities Digital News. For those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk media, because you do teach media, and that is your side hustle as the founder and the owner and operator of the Falcon Valley Group, or for those who want to check you out on a bi-weekly basis on TMZ Live. Let the folks know where they find you.
We had our say about Britney Spears, Britney bitch, last week, so I had it out with Charles. I think I'm gonna win a bet with him. We'll see. In the meantime, you can find my boxing business on Communities Digital News, which is COMM Digi News.com. And this was such a busy show. I got to throw one more thing in. We got a Ring City card this week from Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, a little bit disappointing. Alberto Machado in the main event lost his opponent, Hector Tanahara. His fill-in is a young man from Tijuana, Angel Fierro, and he's talented. He's trained by Eric Morales. We'll see what happens.
Brief plug here for Falcon Valley Group in terms of how you help out folks on the media side.
Well, that is my PR firm. I've got a whole roster of clients, and you are welcome to look me up, falconvalleygroup.com. Thank you for the plug, Michael.
Indeed. I'll go to you, Daniel. Daniel, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you. And a bit of a plug here for the 4 Boxing News and the Inscriber podcast.
Yes, folks, we're going to try to do this Sunday. And like I said, you can catch me on Twitter, Rux99, RAWKUZ99. I do, like I said, pretty much answer everything. I do some crazy things, but I'm going to take my time now to actually do some piece like a remembrance of Hagler and looking at some other things and keeping an eye on everything, because not only do we have those fights to look forward to, an interesting card. I remember that this coming up, like I said, women's fight. Amanda Serrano versus Daniela Bermudez. Anytime Amanda Serrano's on the screen, I like to watch because she is a fighter that you want to see, no matter the shenanigans that come out of it.
For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is on social media. Brother JR at Brother JR76, as I said at the beginning of the show. The website is up, almost under construction still, but it's now public for everybody to see. P4pboxerreport.com. Check out the website. You find where to find us all over social media, the Facebook page, the Twitter page, and brand spanking new, the IG page. Also, where you can email us, P4pboxing at P4pboxerreport.com. And if you scroll to close to the bottom of the page, you can check out my links to my online coaching page. I am a health and wellness coach for Beachbody. Any program on Beachbody on Demand. There's a 2-week trial that runs throughout the year. In short, 2 weeks of free programs. Take advantage of that and all the fitness programs on beachbody.com. Multitude of programs that suits anybody's fitness interest. And if you're interested, again, in anything, all things Beachbody on Demand, or you want to take part in one of my Let's Build Together group fitness challenges, going to do one in April. Going to promise myself to do that. Check out the link on the bottom portion of the Pound for Pound Boxer Report website. On the next episode, we will do a recap, unfortunately, of the because we have to. I ain't gonna say unfortunately, that's the wrong word. We will do a recap of the Okolie Glowacki fight. We will do a recap of the Virgil Ortiz bout. Mentioned the Annabelle Ortiz and the Estrada fight for the strawweight title. Estrada's moving down in weight from 108 to 105. We will do a recap of Artur Beterbiev and his upcoming mandatory defense against Adam Deines. And we will do a preview of the aforementioned Amanda Serrano. She's going to defend her featherweight titles against Daniela Bermudez. Also do a preview of the rematch between Alexander Povetkin and Dillian White last year, August. Povetkin scored one of the upsets of the year, taking out Dillian White in basically one punch, knocked him out in round 5. They're going to go at it again. We may talk about Tim Tszyu. He's going to be fighting Dennis Hogan, but we'll talk about Povetkin, Dillian White rematch, Serrano for sure. So again, this is episode 318 for Gayle from Communities Digital News and the Falcon Valley Group. For Daniel of the Inscriber and for Boxing News, I'm your host, Michael. We'll see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening, good night, and once again, rest in ultimate power to marvelous Marvin Hagler.